Mm. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome, creatives, community, kind folks out there. This is RPG with DBJ. And all I have to say is humans first. Humans every day, all the time, humanocentric, fists in the air, humans everywhere. Well, okay, being kind of silly. Today, we're talking about humans. If you hadn't noticed from the thumbnails from Monday and Tuesday and today, and of course, the rest of the week, we are talking humans in our RPG world, our tabletop RPG games. So today is Wednesday. So, of course, it means it's World Building Wednesday. And so we are going to talk about probably three types of building methods for using well, humans. Of course, it can apply to fantasy. We use Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition as an example plenty of times, but this could apply to any of your RPG settings. All right, so one of the methods of using humans is basically, hey, maybe you want to create in your setting all humans all day, all the time. And your game, like 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, has elves and dwarves and tieflings and all that kind of stuff. And you say, you know what, I want mine to be either more historical or more gritty, or maybe in your mindset you just want to do something different. You don't want other races in your world, so you just say, you know what, I want everyone to play a human, but maybe the variations aren't there aren't as many variations and identifying markers as you'd like. Another method for using a humanocentric type of world is one in which humans are not normally the main focus of whatever you're engaging in, but you still want your human characters and society and culture to be in the forefront. An example would be human beings that colonize an alien world, or sail to an unknown portion of your setting, where the humans are essentially the visitors, the minority. They are the explorers, they are the intruders, and you want to focus on the human portion of this other place. Maybe the humans are brought into Asgard, or the humans are fall into a pit into the nine hells, and you're playing out of Dante's Inferno, or your humans are the first ones to step to colonize other faraway worlds, or use a certain type of travel, or some such, or maybe they're the first humans to go into the hollow earth idea, and there's another world with a dark sun in the middle of our own earth. Charlie, hey, hello there. I don't think I've seen your name before. Charlie Squared says humans are central but not majority. Yes, of course. You can there are some, although not many, role-playing games I know of off the top of my head. Within the Ring of Fire is one of them, where human beings are not the majority. They are not the ones that have dominated the culture. In a way, they are the invasive species, and they are trying to survive in a world where there are so many they're the upstarts, right? They it's a possibility that humans may think they're superior, and they may think that they know what's going on, and when they arrive, they might be tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of other races or beings or something like that, and they might be scratching their heads like, I don't think we're going to fit in here. Also, we can flip that same idea on its head, and the PCs, the main characters in your story, none of them are humans, and the human beings are the invaders. They are the invasive species. They are the force that is spreading like a virus across the world. Rickard, hey, what's going on here? Yes, we did, because you were very insightful. Yeah, Charlie Pelgin. Yep. Oh, somebody else knows within the Ring of Fire. Oh yeah, polygamy. Yay! Riding griffins. Hey, don't forget Pelgin. Pelgin kicked the feline races to the curb to go over to the humans. So they weren't really the first choice, but he likes them because they like to poke each other and breed expansively. Professor Dogo says, do you think humans being a minority in a setting helps convince players to play as a human? Wow, that's a good question. I would say no. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that humans aren't given a lot of, they're not special snowflakes. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but humans are for the most part relegated to the extremely adaptable section of the racial choices in most role-playing games. For you do want to include a race that is essentially lives everywhere, and B, it behooves us to not try to shoehorn human beings into a specific hole, because you want everyone in the world to play your role-playing game and you don't want to keep people out, and B, you could never account for every single human variation on our planet. So it's mechanically and culturally and financially just better to give humans the to wash them in they are extremely adaptable, come in many colors and shapes and sizes, and here's some points to pick and choose where you want. Bad just says, yeah, unfortunately not today. No call, man. All right, I hope you stay up. Now that doesn't mean that you can't do something with humans in your own setting to make them unique. I wanted to point out I can't post the link, or maybe I can post the link. Maybe I'm allowed to. I'm going to try to. I'm going to try to do it. I'm not sure if the moderator is able to do it, or if they just. Let's see if it comes up. I guess it did come up. I'm not sure if you see it. I posted a link into into the chat, and that chat is a link to an old article by Tribality. If you're not familiar with Tribality, back in 2015, and what they did is they created human variants for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons based on environment, and then human variants based on culture. And what they use the half elf template. Wow, it works. Okay, all right. I wasn't sure if the moderator was able to put a link into the chat. I know you guys are unable to do that. It works. It's a one-way system. Yeah. And anyway, what they did is they created variations on humans by environment and culture. So, and then using the half elf, and mind you, this is very specific to 5th edition, but you could apply this to your own games, is to have humans who live in different areas or apply themselves to different cultures, give them specific abilities. And then you could of course, in your own game, whether it is 5th edition or any other game, you could then modify them slightly from there. Like, for example, I'm going to pick one randomly, coastal, human variant by coastal region. It gives them a +1 constitution, +2 dexterity, +1 wisdom. And you gain proficiency with spears, tridents, nets, water vehicles, and 1 tool from the following list: carpenter, cartographer, navigator, weaver, or woodcutter. You also gain proficiency with either acrobatics or athletics checks. Swimming does not cost you extra movement. So in essence, and this goes to something else that I was going to bring up, you can also reskin all or most of the races or aliens or what have you, and just reskin them as humans and be done with it that as well. Ricker says, I've done that in a 5e setting I was working on with professions, so the players could get more options for skills. Exactly. You could essentially, instead of just saying, oh, all humans are extremely adaptable and leave it at that, you could specify, hey, I've got 13 regions in my world, and if you choose to come from the mountains or the Arctic region, or I have 12 cities, major metropolitan cities, or I have 6 factions that are, politically motivated or something, you could say, all right, you have to pick from these, 12 regions or what have you. you gain certain, you pick certain skills, you have certain tools or outfits or whatever benefits you get from that. And then the other options you get to pick would just be like freebie points. So instead of staying there, instead of going 100% adaptable or going 100% structured, you could do a 50-50 or 75-25 or what have you. So maybe 75% of it is you must pick this thing. The other 25 could be, all right, get to pick one proficiency skill and you get to use one extra +1 bonus for one of your other stats or something of that nature. Now, they also, in the tribality article, they go in also talk about 4 types of cultures. And we know that culture and race are 2 separate things. Your upbringing is far different from your genetic material, but in many role-playing games, they kind of combine the 2 for simplicity. And in your world, if you want more nuance, you could separate the 2 as well by saying, okay, you are from a mountainous region, and so your body is adapted to this particular location, and then add to that, okay, now you are part of another culture and do that as well. JP says, I remember some previous setting books had a lot of interesting human race variants, but it was based around real world cultures, Egyptians, Chinese, Russian, etc. And it caused a fuss with some. Yeah, because if you do that, you're going to leave someone out. Again, like I said, for marketing purposes, for simplicity, for ease of use, it's the default is humans are adaptable. Pick how you look, pick your size, pick your racial features, and you're done. As opposed to being specific. That doesn't mean that at your table you can't be highly specific, especially if you're playing like a Far Eastern styled game in a fictional setting, and you're like, okay, we want Thai, Mongolian, Filipino, Japanese, and even now I'm probably leaving people out, Korean. And if you live in that part of the world and you want to play in a game, or you don't live in that part of the world, but you want to play a game that focuses on those cultures in those worlds and the nuances between them, you can just pick your like top 12 in that portion of the world and you're done. So JP says humans are, of course, endlessly flexible in storytelling because they're basically a mirror for our storytelling. And that's another reason, right? We could make the argument that human beings we could roll our eyes at the adaptability issue, but we've kind of clearly proven our adaptability from our own world, our real world examples, from people living in the deepest tropics to the coldest reaches of our own world and everywhere in between, and how they've adapted themselves to live there. From matter of fact, turn on your favorite channel, and there's probably some form of documentarian styled dramatized television show about people living in the extremes, whether it's about fishing or hunting or survival or living on the edge or something like that in the wilderness. You'll find those people, and if you're living in a big city, you're scratching your head like, why do people live in those locations? And that's, it's pretty amazing to see some of those things as well. But the flexibility portion of human beings can kind of present a problem. So when it comes to world building with humans, one idea is using our own real world examples. When your player characters travel the world, travel the regions in your setting, making them culturally significantly different, making people from tropical islands very different from the people who live in Arctic mountain regions, making people who travel the oceans far different from those who live in the desert, and pulling and picking from those cultures. Now, of course, one idea, of course, is to use our real world examples and just reskin minor things. The other way of doing it, of course, is to completely do away with our real world examples and flip everything on their head. So you might pick cold cold region humans and then just try to reskin them as to, surviving on the open seas in the tropics and vice versa. On one hand, you might have some people at the table scratching their head like, well, there's a reason why people adapted by their looks and their talents and things for regions. So that might pull them out of the game. But again, if you really don't want to fall down the same tropes, you could make, pulling this out of my ass, cold region Vikings or Inuits and put them into the tropics and kind of reflavor their abilities and skills, and do the same with people who live in hot weather jungle communities and just reskin that into them living in the cold and Arctic or something of that nature. Now, going back to examples of using humans, having an all human world or all human setting does not mean that you can't still have racial variations. Again, a simple reskin of Dungeons and Dragons, like elves, dwarves, halflings, and just make them humans is perfectly fine. Reskinning a halfling as a human, maybe the humans are just simply fast, quick, lucky, and that's it. Maybe reskinning the ones as elves, maybe they are ignoring the living for 6 or 7 or 800 years, maybe they are naturally adapted to meditation and living in a culture where having a higher realm or mind state might be part of their being. Maybe reskinning dwarves, they are deep miners and use their hands a lot, and they are skilled craftspeople, and they happen to be very tough. Or maybe they are craftspeople, now they build cities and such. So you could reskin darn near any human being, any non-human as a human being into your world, even like kobolds and hobgoblins and half-orcs and all that kind of stuff. Rickard says, interesting enough that setting also had most, but not all, non-human races as God touched humans, so they were humans, but with different looks and stats. It makes perfect sense. And some people might not want to rationalize the differences amongst human beings, but think about it this way. If you consider the movie 300 as a template, in our real world examples, we may not think that there's enough of a variation to warrant having different capabilities, but the people in the past may think of each other so differently that their perception of each other is that they do have different capabilities and that they're God touched or Fae touched or something of that nature. When explorers in our own world met other people from other cultures, they thought of themselves almost literally as completely alien. So it would, within their own mindsets, they would think that each other has special capabilities or touched by the gods or cursed by spirits or something. And that's what gives them particular insights or specialties and skills, or even some form of immunity to like poisons and diseases and that kind of thing. JP says humans are, of course, endlessly flexible in storytelling because they're basically mirror. Rickard says another thing there is population density. A region with low density might be more distrusting of outsiders and harder to get to know, as they don't like to socialize as much. A norm amongst many cultures in our real world. And so in your own setting, you could have, I was going to use the word inbreeding, and that's completely wrong. An isolated, xenophobic culture, one that's been separated from other societies for a very long time, would very well adapt to different areas, which is why we have racial differences in our own world. Our height changes has probably got we've probably got at least a 4-foot gap between our shortest and tallest human beings. We have weight differences of upwards of 600 or 700 pounds in variation. We have color skin ranges. Go ask any woman to talk about makeup, and there are probably hundreds of color variations as well. So So it's possible to have basic human beings in your setting, and then they still have different capabilities. Um, People who live in extremely high climates, not thin air, high elevations. I apologize. High elevations are known to have the greater ability to draw oxygen out of the air than those who live in the lower regions. Yeah, there are 600-pound people. Charlie Square says intrabreeding as opposed to interbreeding. Yeah, intrabreeding probably in the sense that you could have a population of 1,000 or 10,000 intra-breeding, so that you don't have a lot of outliers. But when someone visits them from hundreds of miles away and they haven't met for many generations, and then they finally meet, then you could see the differences. It's the European expansion around the world. They met many cultures where they had never met each other for probably, thousands of years. JP says how like the Chinese have more genetic uniformity compared to, say, Europe. Exactly. When human beings separate, they do diverge and retain. It's actually not correct to say. I'll get to your Tesla Ranger in a minute. It's not correct to say that human beings adapt to their world, but they retain the adaptations they have without changing the useless features. And so therefore you will get things like what is it, the folds in the eyes remaining, being different, or size of lips or nose and whatnot, hair color and that kind of thing, skin color, to adapt to the region. I mean, if the closer you are to the sun, the more melanin you'll need to resist that, those UV rays, which is why you get darker skinned individuals. I mean, and we know biology, and I understand that as a game designer, you don't want to go down that path, but at your table, you're free reign to do any of that kind of thing. Tesla Ranger says the shortest human, 21.5 inches tall, tallest human, 8 feet, 11.1 inches. Wow. 21 and a half inches. Ooh, boy, that's short. Wow. I didn't know they were that short. I've heard of people reaching upwards of 8 feet, but man, of course, once you get to those extremes, you start getting health problems and things of that nature. And of course, we consider them to be oddities, but like amazed by it. So yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, this year, was it last year, went to see the Harlem Globetrotters, and there was a gentleman on the Harlem Globetrotters that had a dwarfism, and he was awesome, and he was no more than 3.5 feet tall, playing basketball with like 6.5 and 7 footers. It was kind of cool. JP says, like, if you look at supermodels across all the races of people, there are some elements that unite all of them, like people with symmetry, clear skin, sharp eyes, etc. Yep. I've even known that many classic models also have features that actually go back to us as children. A certain type of bow in the lip. There's a lot of models are known to have a Cupid's bow to their lip shape, a certain look to the eyes and face, like you said, a certain symmetry. And as a matter of fact, there are some famous models that have a specific defect that affects their symmetry that is also considered beautiful, like a mole or a certain type of a patch of skin or something that's just one slight little marker that imposes on the perfection that makes them different than the other models who have perfect symmetry, making the ones with the slight variation off the symmetry more exotic than those with perfect symmetry, if that makes any sense. JB says, but it's interesting that if you look back at Greek or Roman statues, those features are also popular. Yeah, and of course, again, based on variations through time and culture, you're going to get those things too. some people will find darker, if you live in a region where everyone has darker hair, maybe those people will find darker haired individuals more attractive than, or not. They may find them more acceptable with dark hair, but if they see lighter haired individuals, they may also consider them to be alien or exotic or something of that nature. And then, of course, as human beings, how many times have we all fought against our own, our own, our own, not our symmetry, but our own cultural and racial norms? How many how many places have we gone, or do we know of people who have dark hair that given the first notice, they will dye their hair blonde if they have black hair? We know that it's a funny thing here in the States. We've seen people who the lightest skinned individuals will try to get a tan to darken themselves, yet there are skin products to lighten the skin of people with dark skin, right? I mean, hey, I've got, my hair is very kinky. You'll see products that'll straighten hair. And then you have people with extremely straight hair that want kinky hair. So yeah, you also have that as well. And that pretty much is just a reflection of, oh, wow, all those people look the same. I want to look different. And so once you find the ability to do that, pick and choose how you want to appear to your culture and interact with the people in your world. That's also a very humanocentric kind of thing that you don't often see with like elves and dwarves and such, trying to play against norm, which is a thing that human beings do, but of course you only have limited space in a role-playing game. How many dwarves do you want trying to pretend that they're elves? You know what I mean, it happens, but then you'd have to devote another 300 pages to all of the mixing. Okay, these half elves and these half orcs are trying to be halflings or something. It would be kind of weird that way. Rickard says a tribal mentality tends to be a tendency to show up in less traveled individuals, or rather, I think the tribe definition becomes slightly different. Yeah, and you can. That is a great way to play with that in your setting and make that a mechanical feature. So, for example, let's say that specific cultures have never heard of, or even, for example, Dungeons and Dragons. We have barbarian as a class, but it could be a specific culture they have no reason to ever delve into what a barbarian is, meaning, and I don't mean barbarian generalized, because many cultures look at everyone who's not in their culture as barbarians. I don't mean that. I'm saying like a civilized culture, like let's take our modern day culture today. We have no value in our modern day culture for barbarians, or very little need for barbarians. Whereas some cultures that might be live in much harsher environments, maybe they don't use high technology, they're more tribalized, maybe they absolutely value those kind of class needs. And so that might be a point of contention amongst different cultures as well, where not only do they not, quote unquote, teach people to be a barbarian class, they might find that rather antisocial. Like it's something that's an antithesis to their way of being. You know what I mean? JP says, yeah, you have cultures, but then you have subcultures within the culture, of course. So bringing up the barbarian idea, some would be barbarians, the class. Others would be barbaric in the way they treat each other. So you may have some from an outsider, we may blanket all 5 of those tribes as being just barbaric. They're barbarians in the generalized sense, right? They live in the woods. They decide to hunt their food with spears and not use processed food like we do. They're all barbarians. Whereas their subcultures, maybe there is a subculture where they run into a rage in battle, and they're so full of hate and rage and aggression that they are, they get stabbed and cut, and they just are completely immune to attacks and stuff until their rage abates or whatever. But then there might be another culture where they don't do that at all. And it's like, well, our barbarian classes, it's not that we go into a rage, but we go into a meditative state where we ignore pain to our bodies and we don't scream and yell holding battle axes over our heads, but we hunt down our food and we hunt down our enemies with our an almost determined flipping of the switch in our minds. It's like a meditative state where we go into the warriors. Maybe they worship gods, where they go into a warrior state, and the spirits of the elders go into our bodies to help us defeat our enemies. And that might be their description of how they use the barbarian class and how they survive. But in a civilized world, they're probably just pretty average people. And now, mind you, one of again, talking about these things in a generalized form, it also makes it come across that it could get out of control, right? So you start talking, okay, well, let's see if I have 16 different variations on humans and then 13 different variations on cultures that you can combine together, and then 6 regions in my world, all with 4 different weather systems and stuff. After a while, it might just get out of hand. Again, defaulting back to, well, humans are adaptable. Just tell me where you come from. So helping to build some of your world with your players might shuffling some of that difficulty over to your player characters might be the best thing. Now, I understand and usually this is a very common argument in the tabletop role-playing game community about, do you allow tieflings, dragonborn, or don't you? Someone says, I want only humans in my world. The people who want those drow elves and they want to play, half orcs and stuff, they balk at that idea, and vice versa, right? One way of getting around that is to sit those camps down. If you want to use your reskin those elements in your world, sit them down and say, listen, my world is just nothing but human beings. It doesn't mean you can't play a dragonborn-like individual in my world. You're just going to be human. Maybe you're human beings. Maybe in the past, all the humans have the air quotes blood of ancients inside of them. So some humans are considered to be dragon-blooded. Other humans are considered to be fey-blooded, and they look at themselves, or maybe they look at each other as having the blood of those individuals. Even in our own ancient cultures, people thought of that they were touched by the gods or by the spirits or by the nature or something. So you could make elemental humans that are just far more adapted to it, i.e. erasing the dragonborn, putting human over top of it, and you could even slightly alter you could keep the dragon breath thing, right? Hey, I'm resistant to fire and I can breathe fire. And you're like, humans can do that? That doesn't make any sense. Or you could just reskin it and flavor it a certain way. For example, maybe those humans have always had the ability to be fire breathers, and you just explain it as them being able to swallow oil and light a flame and shoot out fire that way. Or maybe you reskin it in a different manner in which it's not really dragon breath, but it's almost a pseudo mystical or maybe even a psychic ability for them to generate fire at their targets, and that flame just leaks from them, in a time of need or panic or something like that. Or you could just go full arcane and strange with it and just tell them that maybe their blood is flammable or something and they can spit out fire. When they argue with someone and they get pissed off, they spit on the ground and you see like acid fall down, black acid fall down on the ground, and you're just like, ugh, I don't want to mess with them too much. JP says the races you allow in the setting will of course inform the setting. So some GMs will curate that aspect of the game for a specific style of play or setting. I absolutely agree. If you want to play, let's bring up Vikings again, right? And you want to play in that kind of setting, you have every right to like you said, curate the types of human beings that live in those particular regions, holding as close or going as far away from our real world examples. So one example could be you're only playing in areas that are in our real world examples, what me having having lived in those areas might be, Nordic regions. Maybe they're mountainous or cold or what have you from my limited experience with Viking culture, right? Or you could say, okay, we want to play in a Viking cultured world, but they cover the entire scope of our planet. So they live in the deserts, they live on the tropical areas, they live in oceans, they live in jungles, they live everywhere. But there is this accepted Viking styled culture amongst everyone. So you could do that as well without having to go into the racial phenotypes, whatnot. Also, you depending on who's at your table, you want to be really sensitive to cutting away of different racial types versus different cultural types. For example, we may all agree that we want to do a Rokugan, Legend of the Five Rings, pseudo Japanese samurai style game. So we may all agree that all those people have an Asiatic styled look to them. But you might want to be sensitive to the fact that if you're playing in a world where they think everybody else is lesser than them, and somebody comes to your table like myself, and I go, "Hey, I'd like to play like a Moor in your traditional Viking setting." I don't want those players to look at me like Moors are dirty people. They would never incorporate them or something like that. Because there's always exceptions to the norm. As a matter of fact, there's a movie coming out about the first African samurai. I can't remember the year, but there's a movie, I believe. I want to say Chadwick Boseman, but I could be wrong on that. But that's going to be coming out, or hopefully it'll be coming out, which is kind of cool. Rickard says, the reason why Norse-style barbarian gets rage and snap, they are forced to live in darkness 24/7 for at least 3 months a year. And cold, lots of cold and darkness. Yeah, there are regional environmental reasons why people become the way they are. And you could really take that and turn the volume way up to make human beings really unique in your world. The idea that like it's cold and miserable and lack of resources forces people to have to take resources from other areas, whereas cultures with a lot of resources around them may not have a need to explore out beyond their realm. As well as there are cultural things too, whether there's heavy influence by religion or politics that makes people believe in whether there's xenophilia, there's xenophobic tendencies, either makes them insular or causes them to spread out, that kind of thing. Rickard says they suffer from multiple personality disorder and become bards during summer. That would be really weird to have class changes run seasonally. That would be really strange, but that would be really cool too in a strange kind of way. I don't know how you would do that, but I like that challenge. I like that. Hello and welcome to Sweden. I'm going to let you go there because I can't speak on that. But yes, I have heard. I've heard of a city in the far northern reaches of Europe where a gentleman created used a mirror and a solar system. A solar system. Geez, a system to make a machine with mirrors on it that reflects sunlight into a valley. And it seems like a simple object because it's powered by solar collectors to have this giant mirror reflect sunlight into a deep valley. But they say that the sunlight reflected into a park in the deep valley, and I don't know what city this is in, that the well-being of the individuals who live there has like increased like tenfold. There was no reason for anyone there to buy sunglasses until this gentleman created this mirror that reflects bright sunlight into a valley that doesn't get sunlight for months out of the year. and that it really helps people cope with the lack of sunlight. So yeah, but again, humanocentric um, gaming. Of course, we can reskin. We have real world examples to pull from. You can really define the regions both by culture and race. So you can absolutely do that. Now we're going to flow into the humans being the bad guys, which is kind of fun to think about as well. But Rickard says we have two very distinctive cultures depending on seasons: grumpy, tired, and gloomy, with a touch of isolationist equals darkness of winter and summer. How much can we soak in the sun and party? Yeah. Hey, the northern states here in the United States, man, it's the same way. They have two seasons, winter and everything else, right? Once the winter breaks, it's just like, is that sunlight? Is that green grass? I'm the hell out of here. Yeah. So, but that very well could be a using that as an example, that could be a very good way of sparking how and why your human cultures do what they do. So it could be maybe 8 months out the year, this particular culture doesn't interact with anyone. It's tired, it's gloomy, it maybe the winters are strong, the mountain passes are always blocked, but then when the spring and summer hits and just a little bit, they're able to, cross into the lower lands or what have you, and they may come into the summer lands where maybe they ravage the countryside, or maybe they are diplomatic and they want to trade and party as much as they can. They want to, for lack of a better word, breed amongst the people from the summer lands as much as they can before going back home. That's also a possibility, as well as it could be the opposite. Maybe these two cultures are separated, and they're separated maybe by a large ocean or lakes or river systems. But once it gets cold enough for them to freeze over, you can walk across the ice, and that allows them to travel back and forth because maybe they're not very good aquatic travelers. Maybe they're not good sailors or something, or maybe they have a lack of materials to build proper sailing ships, so they have to wait for the winters to cross over. And that could be a great way for when the players are dropped into the world, how things change by seasons or locations based on time as well. Claire's worship. Charlie Square says Claire's worshiping different gods, shifting between Bacchus and Nif. Yeah, oh, that's a great idea. That's a very common thing too. How many times have we seen real world and fictional examples of sailors getting ready to go to the seas, and they do some kind of prayer to the ocean gods like Neptune or something to pray for safe travels? Why wouldn't people shift between the gods based on seasonal changes or regional changes? I think that makes perfect sense. You could even have clerics whose abilities change based on where they are and the season in your game. So winter, spring, summer, fall could have different abilities, and then you could separate by coastal, mountain, desert, jungle, etc., and then give those individuals different abilities. Or the opposite. Clerics don't change because of their worship of one god. Maybe druids completely change based on their devotion to the natural order. So in your world, you could have druids or druidic type characters who, it's going from winter to spring now, so your abilities change. Pick a different set of spells and different set of wild shape choices or something. That'd be a kind of a cool idea as well, to have some weird variations amongst humans. JP says sunlight is definitely an improvement on human health. In Australia, there is no dearth of sunlight. Of course, we also have the highest recorded cases of skin cancer. Easy come, easy go, I guess. Yeah, there's no excuse me, there's no perfect place to live with both the great benefits of where you live and none of the drawbacks. That's I here in the United States, a lot of people who don't live here think of the United States as basically 4 regions all packed together. It's like New York, Texas, Chicago, California, right? I mean, it's kind of like this like weird like four-pronged diamond with like a whole lot of flyover country. But I joke with people who live in California, the major cities in California, that they have their own weather, and they go, "Oh, it's sunny all the time," and I'm like, "Your weather is traffic and earthquakes and forest fires and mudslides. Like, you have weather. You're just not looking at it the same way as the rest of us." Yeah, traffic. Your weather is traffic, and it happens all the time. Charlie says a cleric. I'm sorry, Charlie Squared says a cleric could worship a set of gods like yin yang, or they could worship a single god that changes forms. I definitely agree with that. You could have a pantheon of gods that help them in different regions, or you could just very easily have clerics that each ability is granted by a different god, but they still have their same abilities. So healing spells all come from one particular god, whereas more of the lethal, like, what is it, sacred flame or spiritual weapon, all come from a different type of god in your world. So yeah, that's we've done and we'll continue to do videos on like clerics and things like that as well, Charlie Squared. So don't you worry about that. Now, human beings as the enemy. Let's go for world building with that. Human beings as the plague. There is a video on world building with classes where we went through every 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons class and built a world as if that world was the majority of the world was modified by those classes. And in our Druidic video, we did one where the player characters did not play humans, but the humans were invading from another world, not necessarily another dimension, but like another region. For example, pulling a little bit, very slightly, from Game of Thrones, the Targaryens came from Volantis, a world where upwards of 14 volcanoes erupted. You could have like a Pompeii kind of effect where human beings in another distant land or continent or whatever, some kind of cataclysm happened, or maybe major war. It doesn't really matter what the reason is, but the humans are now leaving, and all of your non-humans live in the undiscovered country, and the humans arrive on the shores of what they consider to be a new world, and the humans could be the invaders, and all the characters are playing like fey creatures and other things where the centaurs and minotaurs and half-orcs and elves and dwarves and all those other things are living not necessarily in harmony, but in more of a tribalistic type of place where maybe there aren't really major cities. They live in harmony with nature, and human beings are bringing with them industrialization and such. And in this way, you could very easily paint the humans as a monolith, right? So you could paint them as this group are all fighters, this group are all paladins, this group is all clerics. One group of all clerics, they're trying to spread their monolithic religion, and then this other group are wizards, and they're trying to steal things from the environment to harness the magic they're stealing from the natural order. Another group are just warriors and fighters, and they're cutting down the woods to build forts and roads and such. You could have the human beings stealing and raping and pillaging, essentially, being the invasive, like an invasive species, not understanding what's going on. And the player characters could either be the warriors to stop it, or they could be the educators to teach the humans not to be the way they are, and that, hey, by the way, guys, people have lived here already, and maybe just because we aren't human doesn't mean we shouldn't live in harmony. There we go. Rickard says, hard to have humans as playable in such a setting. I believe you're referring upwards? Oh, you mean, I'm not sure. I missed your meaning there, Rickard, and I didn't mean to do that. Charlie Square says, imagine starting out with player characters as elves or gnomes and they hear about an evil force called the Scourge and assume it's some alien monster. Then the GM pulls the rug out and it's humans. A dramatic twist. I like that idea too. And wait a minute, that dramatic twist might not be as dramatic. You can double twist the dramatic twist. So they hear about the Scourge, they find out they're humans. The player characters are like, oh, they're just humans. They're not a big bads. And then you find out, yeah, they are. They are terrible. They're overbreeding and they're destroying everything. So you could double twist that. Rickard says, too bad Zev isn't here. Think he might have a better understanding of the Witcher setting. Oh, yes. Yeah, Rickard says, I think the Witcher series are set in a world like that, where the human beings are at odds with the non-humans, and of course everyone sees themselves as the heroes. So I definitely agree that you could, now mind you, in a setting where the human beings are the quote unquote bad guys, you could have some players that say, hey, I want to play a human that understands that they're doing the wrong thing. Now, again, we might be flowing into some real world politics and stuff, and some people that might rub some people the wrong way, as it comes to destroying the environment and, political machinations and whatnot that may be too reflective of real world. But I think it would be behoove us not to use those tropes. And again, if you turn the volume up to 11, it might seem a little ridiculous in the real world, but in your setting, you might want it to be a little bit ridiculous, where these human beings are, the scourge of human beings are unfeeling and unmoved by the plights of the fey creatures that live in the wild forests and jungles and mountains of this new realm, where the humans are like, look, we need to survive. It's like Babylon. I mean, it's like I would say Babylon 5. I'm sorry. It's like surviving a world that has been destroyed, and they are on ships and they have no recourse but to dominate the land that they live. Maybe they have been persecuted as a people and they're not going to take it anymore. Maybe they were diseased. It could be any number of reasons why the humans have escaped or traveled from their own realm, whether it's from their own hubris and they destroyed their own world, or an alien force has come from another world or was summoned from another dimension, and they're just like, look, we need to start over, and you're not going to get in our way. Rickard says, if humans are evil, then you don't really want to be playable. I mean, if I remember correctly, I think the humans weren't native in the Witcher world, but go there as a result of a conjunction of the spheres. And yeah, right, you can name it anything where the humans, whether it's from fear or, for example, we could use the idea of the Salem witch trials here in the United States. Settlers come in, things are not what they seem because the people who live here maybe have some connection to some arcane arts, or their culture is just different, or they just look different. And so the humans their evil tendencies may be motivated by not just a misunderstanding, but the fact that they're fragile, and the misunderstanding reinforces their hatred as opposed to opening up their minds. Now, of course, you do have, there's always an exception to the rule, right? There's always an exception to the rule. Now, that exception may not last very long, and it might not benefit them to be the exception, but there are always exceptions to the rules. So sure, there are some humans that will understand, maybe we shouldn't burn down the woods or cut down all the forests or something. Maybe we shouldn't try to kill the fey creatures or whatnot, instead of taking fly swatters, and maybe they're actually trying to communicate with us. But of course, it depends on how much of a separation you want as humans being quote unquote the bad guys or whatnot. Now, the humans could be manipulated to be bad by an outside force that is specifically making sure that they do not understand their enemy, whether it's by a religious organization. It could be an evil outsider force like fiends or something that perpetuate the myth that the fey creatures, and I'm saying fey generally, not actual fey creatures, but that the creatures that live out in the jungles and the forests and the mountains and deserts are something that is an antithesis to the humans. And it could be something real, right? Maybe there's disease that affects one group and not the other, and they really want to live. And maybe the fey creatures carry a disease that none of them are affected by, but affects the newcomers, and vice versa. Rickard says conjunction of the spheres. It's basically a few multiverses colliding, and things from the various universes spill over, and then the conjunction went away, stranding the things in one place. That's another method of doing that as well, where, especially in science fiction, we've seen that before. Colony ship gets stranded. It's bombarded by radiation. It gets thrown off course. It goes through a wormhole. It can't go back. It runs out of fuel. Someone has corrupted the navigation system. Whatever the accident or purposefully set machination happens, colony ship lands on planet. Colonists leave planet, start to spread across planet, find out that there are other things that live there, and then hilarity ensues as they start to kill each other, right? So the conjunction of the spheres is a very great MacGuffin to use as human beings come from a different world, literally a different dimension, and they arrive here and they can't go back. District 9, the movie of the alien spacecraft that hovers over Earth and are put into shanty towns because they can't go back home. Exactly. Charlie Square, this is the plot of Moorcock's Swords series, the last of the dog or elves, quorum and set against the Mabden, which are humans. I don't remember that. Why don't I remember that? I thought I've read Michael Moorcock's series. I just yeah, I don't know how to. Yeah, I mispronounce everything on this channel. So usually I mispronounce it like 5 different ways before I somehow come across the correct pronunciation and then go back to mispronouncing it again. So yeah, that is a true thing, a truism here. But we're getting to the hour mark. But to summarize, yes, you could absolutely make humans the invasive species, since we tend to do it all the time with and I use it as an example 99% of the time, the goblinoid hordes, right? The orcs, the half-orcs, the goblins, the hobgoblins, or whatever, the bugbears. There's always the goblinoid horde in our very classic traditional tabletop RPGs, especially when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons. But why not make the humans the same way, and make them the monolithic group that is trying to overtake another realm for whatever reason it is, for survival, because they're just plain old evil, misunderstanding God's decree, maybe the oncoming destiny or oracles have foreseen something, and only the strongest will survive. Whatever the case may be, maybe just the whole world's barbaric and they're not evil. They just happen to be one group of barbaric. They happen to be the largest group of barbaric individuals in the game. Within the Ring of Fire role-playing game, Pelgin, the god Pelgin, has basically decreed humans marry 7 wives and have at least 7 children to propagate that deity's region and reach in the world. And the other races in that world are scared of the humans simply because they bring industrialization with them. So you can make them the evil guys. Now, of course, if you want to make a human-centric world, again, you could just reskin all the races in your game. Just take whiteout. Yes, I remember what whiteout is. I'm not sure if you guys are old enough to. Some of you are old enough to remember whiteout, but you get what I'm saying. Erase the serial numbers, just write human over top of it, reskin some things that might not fit into that particular thing, like gnomes. You can just make human beings that are just very good at tinkering with things. Elves the same way. They're just humans that are meditative and enlightened in portion of the world. Half-orc, just make them humans that happen to live in a very harsh environment and they need to survive in a place that's war-torn and whatnot. Again, there's the link to the tribality. I put that in the chat. The tribality article back in 2015, they took the half-elf template for 5th edition and created human variants by environment and human variants by culture. I think there's 4 different cultures, and they picked a bunch of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 environments and whatnot. So you can do that as well. You can come up with your own in your own world, especially if it's very, very arcane. If you've got like floating islands and storms that aren't electrical, but there's like necrotic storms or something, you could also reskin humans to adapt to themselves that way. And then, of course, we have our real world examples. You can use our own cultures, reflavor some things, have maybe pick cultures and regions in your world and have half of them static. Hey, if you come from this place in the world, you have these capabilities, pick these skills, this kind of equipment, these particular stat bonuses, and then have the other portion of it. Oh, and by the way, here are some points you can spread to wherever you want. You know, you can do a half and half or 75-25 kind of thing. And then lastly, make culture matter in your world. So instead of different racial types, meaning like elf, dwarf, gnome, you could have different regional types, certain types of languages, the way they dress, the type of weapons they use, the kinds of foods they eat. And you can make a small list. Basically, don't write an encyclopedia. You can do bullet points. Okay, food, dress, how they relate to religion, gender, survival techniques. Whether do they hunt? Do they gather? Do they have excellent food and water sources? Is it very harsh? Are they warlike? And just do a bunch of bullet points, maybe 5 to 10 bullet points. Figure that out. Player picks where they come from. They're known to have lighter skin, darker skin, tattoos, long hair, short hair. They greet each other certain ways, that kind of thing. And let's go from there. So, guys, thank you very much for joining me. It's of course RPG with DBJ. Again, I always my salutation is don't measure your loves by your hates. Everyone have a great day. Of course, you click on any of these videos that you'll see here surrounding my head. You won't see them now, but you'll see them later. Guys, have a great one. I'll see you later. Bye.